Today, we're going to have, we wanted to give you a feel of kind of some of the things that are going on around the state. We've got an interesting major kind of safety project going on in the southwest part of the state. I'm going to turn it over to MoDOT's Railroad Administrator, Troy Hughes, to talk to you about that.
Good morning, everybody. Like Eric said, I'm Troy Hughes. I'm the Administrator of Railroads for MoDOT in our multimodal group. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about our group and then our corridor projects that we do have going on in the Southwest District. Next slide. So for the multimodal rail section in our projects group, we manage state and federal highway grade crossing improvement projects. We get about $7.8 million a year. And for the federal portion of that, which is the bulk of it, we have to spend 50% of the funds on protective devices. So that would be normally upgrading an existing railroad crossing from either just the crossbuck signs to lights and gates, or even upgrading a crossing that only has flashers to flashers and gates. And we do have some bigger projects that might involve grade separations that we participate in, usually with the local entities. And then kind of what I said, this funding is specifically for existing highway and rail crossings, so we cannot participate in funding for new crossings. And then kind of to kind of go with what Amy was saying, our projects are also in the STIP, in the multimodal section. So you can look at what crossings we have planned to work on in the next 3 to 5 years. And one thing about our section of the STIP, it's a little more tricky. We put planned projects in there, but to move a project forward, we have to have an agreement with the local road authority, which is sometimes MoDOT, but a lot of times it's either the county or the city and the railroad. So sometimes some of those negotiations break down, so projects can get delayed beyond the years that are listed in the STIP. Next slide. So kind of just a high overview of the 2 rail corridor projects that we've got going on in the Southwest District. We were recently awarded the AASHTO's President Award for those projects. And one project is in Lawrence, Christian, and Greene County, which has to be along Highway 60, which is predominantly a 2-lane road. And for the study, MoDOT was the lead agency for the study. And then a second study that was done in Webster County. The county was actually the lead agency on the study. And it is also with the BNSF Railway on their north subdivision. And then it's also immediately adjacent to Highway 60, which is a 4-lane expressway in Webster County. And these studies have led us to be able to get 2 FRA grants, totaling $13.1 million, with the total project costs of both the grants that we were awarded of $23.7 million. Next slide. So kind of what we won the AASHTO award for was the study process that we used. Kind of traditionally, over MoDOT's history, we kind of looked at each crossing as an individual project. We didn't look too much at corridors. I mean, it was done some, but kind of we knew what the worst crossings were, and we updated those crossings and really didn't look at the corridor. But as we've made, I'd say good progress on getting some of the worst crossings in the state upgraded, we're now looking more at the corridor, trying to look at what's the best approach for the whole corridor. Because sometimes when we did individual projects, we didn't look at what the big picture was and the opportunity to make better improvements along the corridor. And as part of this process, we reached out to the public, and that was really the key to this process, was getting the public input, because these corridor projects usually involve grade crossing closures. So we, close some crossings and then improve others as part of the project, and making sure we had the public buy-in was really important. And some of these locations, we've talked about making similar improvements in the past, but we didn't really get the public in, and those projects didn't really progress. But like I said, the experience we've learned through this is that the public input is, a key component of getting the projects done. And then for both of these corridors, we used a consultant to lead the study with both MoDOT and railroad participation in the study. And as far as, kind of MoDOT's goal for this, as far as multimodal, is it has to be about safety, because that's what our funding is for. For the first corridor we did, all we really looked at was, crossing safety, and we funded that project 100%. The Webster County project that was done, we participated in that project, but because the study was more beyond railroad crossings, so it had components of economic development and other things that were a part of the study. We only participated in a small portion of the cost of that project. So next slide. And this is the first corridor study that we did in Lawrence, Christian, and Greene County. And that project goes essentially from Aurora up into Republic. And that's kind of the corridor map there. Next slide. So during that study, there was 9 public meetings that were conducted, and we had broken that section up into that corridor up into 3 sections, and we held 3 meetings in each section. The outcome of that is we're planning to close 4 at-grade crossings and then construct 2 connecting roadways that will provide access for the crossings that are closed. 4 passive crossings, which are crossings without lights and gates or lights, will be upgraded to include lights and gates. And then we're also looking at Highway 60 improvements. So we've added some right turn lanes that will hold storage. So if a side road has a train going through it, those people will be able to get out of the main traffic way while they wait for the side road to open back up. And then this project is $5.2 million, and the Chrissy Grant is paying for 50% of that project. Next slide. So the other project is the Webster County Corridor Project, and it essentially runs from Fordland to Diggins in Webster County. And next slide. So the overall study that was done by the county is a 22-mile corridor with 49 highway intersections and 36 railroad crossings. The study had 12 public meetings, and the master plan that came out of that study was 21 at-grade railroad crossings could be closed. It envisions 8 interchanges to be constructed, 2 overpasses, and then 27 miles of outer road. And the total cost of that would be $133 million. So MoDOT, in cooperation with the county, we kind of identified kind of a phase 1 project and submitted that for a Chrissy Grant. And that project would include 9 public and private highway railroad crossing closures, an interchange at Route A, and 6 miles of outer road. And then we've also included in the grant preliminary engineering and environmental work for the Route Z potential interchange, which would be kind of the west end of that project. And the grant we received the total project cost of that is 18.5 million. The grant money was 10.5 million, and then for the matches on that grant, I mean, that's a MoDOT, the county, and the BNSF Railway is providing the local match for the federal funds. So next slide. So that's kind of all I had kind of on those projects specifically. We also want to kind of let you know that through the kind of the last transportation funding bill, they enacted a requirement that all states conduct a highway, rail, grade crossing action plan. So that will be us taking a look at basically all the data associated with all our highway, rail, grade crossings, and trying to develop a plan of prioritizing each crossing kind of in the state, identifying kind of the worst ones that we would want to work on over the next 3 to 5 years, which, you know, is kind of typically what we already do, you know, with our STIP. But one thing that we really plan on doing with this study is having a pretty comprehensive public involvement plan with this. So sometimes my vision gets a little bigger than the budget, but hopefully, you know, what we want to do is create a mechanism where either the MPOs or RPCs, you know, will have an opportunity to provide comment, you know, and, you know, one thing we learned, you know, when we interact with the public is, you know, sometimes we learn a lot about crossings, you know, that could get improved with some simple stuff. Either, you know, it has really steep slopes that if we would, you know, flatten those out some, you know, trucks wouldn't drag on them like they do. And so we're really hoping that this feedback will really help us, you know, in the near future of helping identify projects that may be floating under the radar that, you know, just isn't getting picked up. And probably one thing I should mention is really, you know, one of the things that we use to prioritize projects right now is the train volume, the train speeds, roadway volumes and roadway speeds. And, you know, we take that information and some other things and really kind of produce a prioritization list for all the crossings in Missouri. And that kind of helps us find, you know, which crossings need to be worked on. And the FRA actually does a similar thing on their website. So if you're ever interested and you want to go out to the Federal Railroad Administration website and just kind of look at their accident predictability system, you can generate a prioritization list kind of based on their formula that they do, and they take into accident history also. So we look at that as well when we do our prioritization. But like I said, the one thing we hope to get out of our grade crossing action plan is a lot more public input into our process. So we're hoping to kick that off here in this spring in April, and then have it wrapping up this fall with the mandate. Our federal deadline is February of 2022 to have this done. So we're going to be moving pretty quick on it, but like I said, we definitely want to get public input on that. And one other thing I want to mention was we also are conducting the statewide freight and rail plan is underway, and Cheryl Ball's leading that for multimodal, and it's underway. And what I wanted to point out is the industry meetings are coming up for that, and that's from February 23rd through March 2nd. We're holding various meetings, and we'll, if anybody's got any questions on that, they can contact me, or if you know Cheryl, you can reach out to her. But we can also look at possibly distributing the flyers that she has for those meetings to everyone. So if you want to go to the next slide, that kind of wraps up everything I had and wanted to mention. So say too is that you don't have to wait for that grade crossing action plan to get going. If anytime that anybody has any concerns about a crossing, I mean, they can feel free to reach out to me or even our district staff, and they can pass that along to us. So with that, I'll look for any questions.
All right, Troy, thank you. We do have some questions for you. I think you've answered a little bit of this, but how are future projects vetted for safety enhancements that exist locations? And what is the process to reapply?
Yeah, so that was kind of what I was talking about before. We do look at the traffic counts for both the roadway and the trains and their speeds. And then we also look at public comments. So if we're getting complaints on a crossing, we'll take a look at that. And then obviously if there's accidents at a crossing, we take a look at those. And like I said, try to look and see if there's anything that we can do at the crossing to make improvements.
Very good, Troy. We had another question. How do you safety in the railroad world? By crashes?
Yeah, I mean, kind of that. I think probably, I mean, the best way to kind of look at it is kind of what the FRA, kind of their accident predictability model, crashes, is an unfortunate result, but they don't necessarily tell the safety of a crossing. I mean, we can have a very safe crossing and people make a choice to go around the gates and get hit. So it's not an absolute, for crashes, but like I said, the accident predictability that the Federal Railroad does, which is basically what I was talking about with traffic volumes, it's more about trying to predict where the next accident's going to happen. And you heard me kind of talking about closures. It's kind of the saying in the railroad industry is the safest crossing is a closed crossing. So, we do look for crossing closures, if we can make, kind of like with this Webster County project, we're closing 9 crossings, and then constructing a bridge so that folks will be able to cross the railroad tracks on the bridge, and then also with the interchange, get on Highway 60 safely. So, if we can eliminate the at-grade crossings, that's a big step into making sure that accidents will not happen at those crossings.